Good morning, and the purpose of today's webinar is, as Jen just introduced, is really to introduce you to and raise awareness of organizations, programs, potential partners, and incentives you may be able to tap into as you grow your operations. Again, like Jen mentioned, we really do want this to be interactive. Each one of the panelists has about 5 to 7 minutes of information on programs to present, but if it sparks questions as we go along, please use the chat like Jen mentioned, and we'll try to get as many questions answered as possible in the time we have together. So why are we doing this presentation? Well, obviously you matter, your business matters. The success of the industry as a whole definitely matters to New York State as well as the regions that you operate in. So many of you have probably seen these numbers already, and I always think it's a good refresher and recenter to just remind ourselves, particularly as we're asking partners to support us, the impact that your individual operation and the industry as a whole has on New York State. So these numbers are according to Wine America's 2022 New York Economic Impact Study. So the New York wine industry currently has more than 470 producers in the state with more than 35,000 acres of vineyard that are responsible for more than 92,700 total direct and indirect jobs, more than 54,500 direct jobs. Those jobs pay more than $5.64 billion in wages and generate more than $1.58 billion in federal, state, and local tax revenue. Not to mention your industry attracts more than 5.6 million tourists annually, and those tourists spend more than 1.9 billion. So what's in a bottle? 14.93 billion in total economic impact, as well as a whole lot of love and hard work from all of you. So thank you for everything that you do for the industry in New York State. Additionally, Stefan and I are both New York Wine Grape Foundation board members, and supporting industry growth as well as continued education and best practices is really part of the foundation's mission. Throughout the year, the foundation provides free sessions like this one, as well as additional sessions to members with sales, marketing, compliance, tax experts, as well as ongoing partnerships with Cornell, Wise Academy, and depending on the tier of membership, some foundation members are also eligible for Farm Credit East's benchmark program, as well as discounted rates to Bev New York. Jen will drop a link to the membership page for the New York Wine and Grape Foundation in the chat area, and I'm sure she'd be happy to follow up with you with any questions that you might have on membership. We'd love to have you on the team. So why is Greater Rochester Enterprise involved in this presentation today and in the Wine and Grape Foundation board? Well, GRE's mission is to support company growth. That means attracting new companies like the Coca-Cola Fairlife deal that some of you may have seen, $650 million in investment going to Monroe County and Webster. Li-Cycle, Plug Power continues to invest in our region, as well as helping companies expand and grow. We promote the region nationally, locally, and beyond. We like to talk about and use our social media channels and our media partners to talk about your cool companies and technologies and innovations that you're doing. I believe Boundary Breaks was on here. They were recently featured in one of our YROC segments, which is a partnership with Channel 8. So if there's some really cool things and technologies that you're working on, please reach out, let us know. We'd love to help promote that. And really at the end of the day, what we do is connect you to the right people and the right resources to successfully expand your company and grow in the region. Now, I think the Rochester and the GRE team that covers the Finger Lakes region, basically the border of Buffalo to the border of Syracuse, is pretty special. But in reality, New York has 10 economic development regions, and in each one of these regions, there are economic development organizations that do very similar work to GRE. So to our west, which is pretty aligned with the Niagara Escarpment as well as Lake Erie, that's our partners in West Buffalo, Niagara. To the east is Center State CEO, and to the south is Southern Tier. So even if you're not sure exactly who your regional economic development organization is, chances are you know what county you operate in and who your industrial development agency partner, like Steve Griffin from Yates County, who's on here with us today, is. And what I like to think is whether your project and your expansion or your growth opportunity comes into GRE or the regional EDO, New York State through Stefan Fleming, Annette Brenner, who represents the New York State Manufacturing Extension Partnership in the Finger Lakes region, or your individual county, that when you talk about what you're going to be doing, each one of us is more than capable of getting you connected to the partners that can help support that growth. So how does that work? Well, at GRE, if you call me or you call a member of our business development team, this is the type of consultation we'll take you through that we believe is designed to help you get the most support possible, either from our government partners, business partners, or other economic development partners that may be able to support you. So first and foremost, you have to be able to define your project. What exactly are you doing? Are you doing it? And I think I just highlighted why the location is important. And is this competitive with other states or other regions? So when I say, what are you doing? Are you doing an expansion to your existing facility? Are you building new? Are there infrastructure upgrades? Just really defining what that project is super important out of the gate. And when you define that project, usually it's your 3 to 5 year business plan. If you can highlight your capital budget, again, the facility upgrades, improvements, or new build, fixtures, equipment, large pieces of equipment that you're purchasing in year one, $100,000 that's a big deal for wineries and producers. But if you're going to purchase more equipment and couple that with facility upgrades in years 2 or 3, we could be talking about a substantial project here. And if you can couple that capital investment in years 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 with the jobs that will either be created or retained in each of those years, then you're pretty much ready to talk with some of the members on this panel. And that's exactly what GRE will do for you. Help you define that project scope, make sure that you're prepared with your capital budget, your jobs. I also like to help the company, work through defining the need or the gap, because there is, this is important to note, a but if for clause in state and local incentives. And that's important because at the end of the day, this is taxpayer money. We just saw how much the industry contributes to it. Obviously, we'd like to see this money and incentives come back to New York State and to the region to support the industry, but incentives in general are not retroactive. And you have to help our government partners make the case that but if for their support, the project may not happen, or it may not happen to the scope that it is. And generally, that's true. Companies sometimes just don't think through it in that way. So these are all conversations we'd love to have with you. And I know that some of my colleagues and partners in other regions and counties would also love to have with you. And the only other last piece I'll add before I hand it over is sometimes, and that's why I set it up with the beginning of this presentation with the impact on the industry. Sometimes we think small, we think a piece of equipment in year 1, we don't look at years 3, 4, and 5 for a total project. And a lot of times I don't see companies look at the total impact of the individual project. So think about if you're purchasing stainless steel tanks or large pieces of equipment from local manufacturers. I mean, I see advanced steel metal tanks in almost every winery I walk through in the Finger Lakes. I mean, if your project is positively impacting another supplier in the supply chain in New York State or in your region, it's important to note the total impact that your growth is having on other direct or indirect industries in the supply chain. So just some food for thought. And when you have your project defined, when you know your budget, when you know your jobs, and when you know your need, it's time for us to then figure out who can plug in to your specific project to support you. And a lot of times that's New York State, that's your county IDA, that's NextCorps or your regional manufacturing extension partnership. And if there's upgrades to infrastructure, sometimes that's the utility. So with that, Stefan, I'm gonna hand it over to you if that's okay.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Leah. That was a really excellent overview and really hits on some of the key points that we're looking for when we are talking with you about some of the programs that we have at Empire State Development, of which, as you can imagine, there are a lot of them. I have a lot of information here that I'm going to try and convey as quickly as possible. I want to thank Leah and Jen and the Wine Grape Foundation for putting this together. I'm happy to be here presenting to all of you. So I'm going to be talking about the Regional Economic Development Councils. We're in round 13. This is the 13th year that we're going to be doing the regional councils. And as I think a lot of you know, Empire State Development does a lot. We have a lot of programs and a lot of divisions. I'm going to be focusing on the Regional Economic Development Councils, on the Excelsior tax credits. But we also have other divisions like I Love New York, and our global New York partners for people that are exporting. So just want you to keep in mind that there's a whole host of programs that we have out there. Today, like I said, I'll be focusing on the regional councils. I'll be talking about the consolidated funding application, namely general ESD funding and the Excelsior tax credit. Those are the two most popular, most often used programs that we have, both through the regional councils and during our open enrollment periods. And I'll also be talking about the new craft beverage micro grant that is brand new this year. So as Leah showed this map earlier, what are the regional councils? The regional councils are the business leaders, the education leaders, the community leaders in each one of your regions, and they are the ones that are deciding what the priorities of each region are going to be. What are the strengths? What are the opportunities in each region? It's the local people on the ground that are having the decisions as to how state funding can be allocated, and having a say in how those funding, which projects that funding might go to. So the consolidated funding application is the process through which you are able to apply for funds for the regional council. What is a consolidated funding application? Well, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a streamlined approach to funding requests. Instead of having one application for every single funding stream or every agency in New York State government, there's just one application that you fill out. It's a single portal allowing access to funding from various agencies and programs. And there's currently 30 programs from 10 different state agencies that are available through the CFA. So I want you to keep these two timelines in mind when you are trying to decide, when you're going through those key points that Leah just had up on her screen. I want you to keep these deadlines in mind for when you need to be applying. We have what we call deadline programs, and we have open enrollment programs, and I'll explain what that means in a moment. But for the deadline programs, the CFA application window just opened 2 weeks ago on May 15th, and it will close July 28th at 4 p.m. sharp. There will be no late submissions allowed after that. So if you're thinking of submitting an application, please don't wait until the last week of July to be submitting an application. Start thinking about that now. Start thinking about all those questions and all of that information, that 3 to 5 year plan, and all the equipment that you might need and all the jobs that you might create for your investment in your business. Start thinking about that now and start putting pen to paper. Like I said, it closes July 28th at 4 p.m. And then in late fall is typically when the award announcements are made. New since, at least since the pandemic, the state has started doing open enrollment for some of our other programs. It's the same state funding, but for general ESD funding and Excelsior and a couple other funding programs we have, they have decided to do open enrollment until one, either the funds are exhausted, or number two, until the next round happens the next year. So between now and round 14 opening in May of 2024. So keep this timeline in mind because it's very important to meet these dates. So as I said, we have deadline programs and open enrollment programs. And as you can see on the left side, the deadline programs, there is a number of them. And large amounts of money that are available on a competitive basis to businesses throughout New York State. The ones that I think most people on this call are going to be interested in would be Market New York for tourism. There's the Craft Beverage Micro Grant Program, which, as I said, I'm going to talk about a little bit more in a little bit. But then there's also under Ag and Markets, there's the New York Grown and Certified Program. In my opinion, one of the beauties of the consolidated funding application is that you can apply for as many programs as you think that you qualify for. If you're going to be doing tourism aspects to your business, advertising, marketing, you can apply for Market New York. The most popular programs, the ones that are most typically coupled together, are the ESD grant funds and the Excelsior jobs programs. But you can put these together to try and maximize the incentive that you're going to be getting out of your application through the CFA. All right, so let's talk about general ESD funding. It's capital grant funding available for capital-based economic development projects intended to create or retain jobs. For-profit businesses, as well as all of these other organizations, are welcome to apply. And as Leah's already said, the funds may be used for acquisition of land, buildings, and machinery, demolition and environmental remediation, new construction, renovation, acquisition of furniture and fixtures, soft costs up to 25%, and planning and feasibility studies for, excuse me, for the capital project. The other program, one of the other most popular programs that we have is the Excelsior tax credit. The Excelsior tax credit is a 10-year tax credit for manufacturing jobs, as well as sales and back of the house jobs. So some office jobs that are in support of manufacturing jobs. It is, like I said, it's a 10-year tax credit, and you have to create all of the jobs within the first 5 years of being admitted into the program. You must create those jobs in the first 5 years and then hold all of them through the end of year 10 to realize the full benefit of the tax credit. But if you're going to be creating jobs as part of your program, there's really no reason not to be applying for the Excelsior tax credit. It's getting credit for the work and the jobs that you're already going to be doing. So I highly encourage people to use this one all the time. New this year is the Craft Beverage Micro Grant Program. So this grant program was created as kind of a response to a lot of the producers, just like all of you that I've talked to, that have said, I'm not making a vast investment. I'm not doing the 3 to 5 year, you know, I'm not creating 20 to 30 jobs. I'm not investing $500,000 or $2 million or $5 million. I need one piece of equipment. I need a bladder press, or I need a bottling line, or I need a few tanks. And it's only going to be a small but still very impactful investment to your business. The Craft Beverage Micro Grant was created exactly for that. It is only available to licensed manufacturers throughout New York State. It's for the purchase of new equipment. It could also be for infrastructure and facilities expansion and upgrade, or expansion of equipment that you already have at your facilities. It's a 50-50 matching grant, which means that if you're purchasing, for example, a $100,000 piece of equipment, you could apply to have to get a $50,000 grant from ESD to pay for half of that piece of equipment. Now, I know a lot of your equipment is a lot larger than, it costs a lot more than $100,000. But again, this was created as a response to the need for people that are not doing the 3 to 5 year plan. So I encourage you to take a look at this, but one of the notes that I need to add is that this is a standalone project. This is a standalone program. It cannot be combined with the general funds. It cannot be combined with Excelsior or some of the other programs that I just showed on that screen a couple minutes ago. This is standalone. So if you're going to be doing a larger project at 3 to 5 years, more than, let's call it $250,000 to $500,000, you're going to be creating jobs. This program may not be the right fit for you, but it is another tool that's available in the tool belt. So I encourage you to keep it in mind if it might be useful to you. So I also just want to talk about the consolidated funding application. You know, I'm not going to read through all of these slides. I'm going to make them available, and I'm going to have this presentation sent to Jen to send around to everyone afterwards. But it's just, I encourage you to take a look through these. It has a little bit of information about the review and the scoring. The 20% is done by your local regional economic development council. That's where they have their say. And then I highly and very strongly recommend that you check out regionalcouncils.ny.gov. There is just an amazing amount of information available here. There are the guidebooks and other CFA resources. There are the agency program webinars, which will be happening throughout the year before the applications are due. And there's so much more information than I could possibly convey in a webinar here. So I strongly encourage you to take a look here and read through some of the information at the Regional Council website. Through here is where you can either create a profile, or if you already have a profile, you can log in. And this gives you kind of a step-by-step of how you can go through and select the programs that are going to be available to you, and the ways in which that you will be asked for information as you are inputting all of that information that Leah was talking about your project, about the but-for, about the need for the project, for the incentive from the state. And the one other great piece of advice I want to give is make sure that you are saving as often as you can. And again, lots of information here. I encourage you to take a look at this on your own time when you're able to sit down and really dive into all of this. But I'm happy to take questions at the end of this when we're all finished. And just want to say thank you again for all of you that joined today.
I was going to say, Stefan, you got off easy. No questions have come through. That's a great craft beverage micro grant, and I'm sure everybody on here is going to be happy to help you spend that down so we can get another allocation next year.
Absolutely.
Steve, how can the local IDA help?
First, by helping me figure out how to get my screen to share. So, good morning, everyone. Steve Griffin, I run the Economic Development Agency within Yates County. I have this first slide up here. I know a lot of the attendees looked like they were from the Finger Lakes and actually quite a few from Yates County. So I'm not here to help you understand where you're from. I assume you know where you're from. But I share this slide because this is one of the slides that I use when we're speaking to any new prospective business to come into the area. To show the importance that we realize that this industry has for us and within our economy. The second bullet point, that we love alcohol, usually generates a fair amount of laughter, at least raises some eyebrows. But we do lead with it. We know how important it has been, not just within your own industry, but we know that it's helped us be a catalyst in growing other industries within our county as well. The other reason I have the slide up here is, as it's been mentioned, the Finger Lakes Economic Development Center is how we do business. We're actually the Yates County IDA. There is an IDA or an economic development organization in every one of the counties in New York State. You have regional economic development groups like the GRE. So even though I'm going to go over programs and such that we do, understand that there is a similar organization of mine in your own county. And if you don't know who that is, as Leah mentioned, contact us. I will almost guarantee we know who they are and know the individuals, and we can connect you if you aren't sure. One thing that is, even though there is a economic development group in every county, we do things a little bit differently. And we did create some programs not long after I started to specifically help grow the wine industry specifically, but the craft beverage industry in whole. It's been very successful. And in fact, off of that, we have hosted economic and government officials from, I think we're up to 6 or 7 different countries now that have come in to see how the programs have worked and how they can utilize them to help grow the industry, their agricultural industry back in their area. And so we're going to hit a little bit of that going forward here. There's 2 main programs. The tax reductions on the left side of the slide, every IDA has, and they might do it a little bit differently, but this is sort of a general program. It's property tax exemptions. So the press releases, news articles, media, a lot of times you'll read most about pilots. That's what the property tax abatement is. It's an acronym, pilot, payment in lieu of tax. They are 10 to 15 year programs, generally speaking. That's where some of the flexibility comes in per region or per county. That helps you reduce your property taxes. What's important to note is, and I probably should have it in here, it almost always only impacts the increased value of your property after a project. So going on these, you're putting up a tasting facility, whatever you're paying in your property taxes prior to putting up that facility, you will continue to pay on. Where the pilots come in is the new tax value, new property taxes you would pay for that new tasting facility. And generally speaking, it front loads your savings after your cash has been spent. So it tries to help you out most up front. So some period of time, maybe it's a year, maybe it's 2, 3, 4 years, you won't pay any additional property taxes on the increased assessed value. Still paying it on your previous tax. It's the new value that this will help you reduce. And then there's usually some sort of straight line called depreciation going after that reduces that benefit. So if we just did a standard 10-year, maybe year 1, you have 100% break on that new value. Year 2 is a 90% break. Year 3 is an 80% break, and so on until it runs out. Also within that program, there are sales tax exemptions. This is not so that you don't have to charge sales tax to customers. This is on materials that would go into that construction projects or whatever it may be. Again, if we're using the new tasting facility idea or example, any of the materials that would go into building that facility, you would be exempted from paying the state and county sales tax. Really important on all of this, get to your IDA ahead of the project. We cannot come in after the fact. That same but-or statement applies. We have to be in ahead of it because there's all sorts of different schedules, and the assessors get really, really mad at us if we try to come back after the fact and say, oh, by the way, there was a property tax abatement on that project. The last part of that same program is a mortgage tax exemption. Every county charges, at least I believe it's every county, charges some sort of tax on however amount you mortgage. So if you were to mortgage $500,000 to build that tasting facility, counties charge anywhere from maybe 0.75 percentage point to 1.5, somewhere around there, and it can eliminate that as well. The right side of the screen is where things get a little bit more creative based on your local economic development group. We created an ag-specific loan fund now probably 15 years ago or so that was focused specifically on the wine and grape industry. And it's a 1% loan. It can go from 5 to 7 years. And it's really for any purpose, any use within your business. It can go for acquisition of property. It can buy rootstock. You can buy storage tanks. It's up to $150,000. We've become more creative or more flexible on the payment terms. It's 7 years. I think we have some now that are 10 years. And where we become more knowledgeable ourselves is in that repayment structure. It can be twice a year payments. It can be once a year payments based on whenever you're receiving your money in for whatever if it's for you're selling your grapes at some point of the year, we can schedule the payments so it impacts you then. Really not meant to be a mortgage, because you can say it's still fairly quick payback periods, even though it's a low interest rate. So most of the time it's used to help sort of either gap financing or, again, a lot more in the machinery and equipment side of things. Based off the success of that program, regions started picking up similar programs. So in our region, the Finger Lakes region, we have what's called the GAIN Loan Fund. It's an acronym for Growing the Agricultural Industry Now. Same exact program. It goes up to $200,000. That this was through the regional councils, through that CFA portal that Stefan was talking about. The region applied for a lump sum of money that was then distributed across the various economic development groups within the county to draw down on. I know the southern tier has done that as well. They asked actually specifically for our loan program, so that they just submitted that and it received, I think, the first regional fund through that. So I think there's a number of other regions that have since copied the program because it's successful. And then we can also help the local IDAs that the CFA portal, it's a great tool. It can be challenging if you're not sure exactly how to maneuver through it. And at least in what we do for our businesses is we're happy to sort of review the applications or give you some talking points as to what might score better within the state and what you may want to focus on while you're going through that application. The great thing of that portal is it does give you access to all the different programs. There is a challenge with that from time to time, as it can be overwhelming because there's a lot of programs that the state now offers, and we can try to whoever your local reps are can try to help you maneuver through that portal a little bit more. I was asked to give some examples. We have done a lot of projects within the wine and grape industry, more than I could really come up with. So just some examples of what we've done, and we blend the programs. So we've done financing to help get tasting facilities and production facilities built. And then we have put the pilot or property tax abatements, the tax savings programs on the facility itself. Just two real quick images I grabbed. The one on the left is Magnus Ridge. the one on the right was Starkey's Lookout, is now 10 Barn Brewing. So it switched from wine to beer, but we stayed within the craft beverage industry. They utilize multiple programs, again, from the financing and the property tax programs. Machinery and equipment purchases, we have helped buy farm equipment. We have done, I don't know how many tanks we have helped purchase, but it's a lot of them. Bottling lines, I think as Stefan mentioned. So really any mention of machinery equipment, our loan fund has been used to help property acquisition. I've mentioned already the rootstock, ancillary products and services. So trying to figure out other revenue sources you can utilize while you have customers on site. So our programs have also been used to help build out cafes within your tasting facility, and then building is the inn at Glenora. We utilized our pilot program to help them build that a number of years ago. And then again, a current project we're working on right now is it's the same as the images you see here. We're looking at the financing programs to help a current winery that's looking at a fairly large expansion with some renovations to the tasting room and production equipment, storage tank acquisitions. And then they're looking at doing a larger event venue, which we're looking at the property tax breaks for, and have already sent the links for the CFA portal, and we're trying to help guide them through that. So I work best, and I assume most of my colleagues do as well, when you present your project to them. A lot of the times we get asked, hey, what programs are available to us? And there's a lot of them. And the best way that we can answer is if you describe what it is you're trying to do, we can then go out and point you to or describe you to the projects that have probably the best application to your project. And myself and any of my colleagues would be happy to do so. Jen has my contact information. I'm sure that'll be sent out, but there it is. If you need it for any particular region, again, I get my programs stopped at the border of Yates County. However, I've been on the regional council now, actually since its inception. So 13 years I've been on it. I'm on the scoring committees and the executive committees. So I'm happy to help answer questions and guide you as it relates to that as well. So thanks for putting this on, and looking forward to working with many of you going forward.
Steve, a couple questions came in. So that 1% loan fund, you mentioned some other regions. The question is that it's statewide or Finger Lakes or county only? So maybe just a little insight on who administers that program. Would it be the local IDA?
I would suggest going through your local IDA. So in our case, I'm probably too down in the weeds here. It was actually, the grant was given to the Genesee Finger Lakes Regional Planning Council as the initial grant source, and then each county pulled from that fund, and then as it gets paid back, it stays within that particular county IDA. So sometimes it's regionally based, sometimes it's county based, but your county IDA or your town or city IDA should be aware of it, and can again direct you to it. It's gonna differ based on where you are. If you're in the Finger Lakes, the 9-county Finger Lakes, it's definitely through your county.
Great. Right. And I don't want to ignore the Fred Bissett here, which is phenomenal. We have someone on who's actually going to be going through growth. So Fred, we'll connect offline on that. I think there's a lot to unpack on the project that you have potentially moving forward. Again, I think like Stefan, Steve, and myself so far have covered, nothing is retroactive. So for anyone that's planning expansions that's on here today, again, we need to think through having these conversations about your growth and who can support it prior to making those investments, but very excited to plug in, get you connected, and assist with that expansion. And then finally, the other question that came in before Annette tells you about her amazing program that almost everybody in this industry uses is, how do IDA programs cross over with SBA programs? I'll jump in really quick on that. From the GRE side of things, the SBA usually helps with the business planning and helping define that that 3 to 5 year actual budget and plan. Steve, Stefan, Annette, do you guys have experience with crossover with the SBA?
Mhm.
Yeah, from a financing perspective, I mentioned last time, our loan fund becomes the gap financing mechanism. And so our local banks will utilize SBA small assistance financing and loans, mainly through their guarantees, their loan guarantee programs. And then we come in and we fill in a certain segment of that program, mainly because the interest rate, at least in our case, are pretty competitive. So the SBA, the local bank might utilize SBA guarantees to do the larger mortgage, the larger financing aspect of it, and then utilize the IDA money to help purchase some of that machinery and equipment or inventory, whatever it may be.
Great.
And in our case, I should jump in, I'm sorry, real quick. On our case, and I assume again, most cases through the local economic development groups, we realize we're almost always going to have to take a second position on collateral. And so we do that. And that is one question that comes up a lot, at least initially, if you haven't done a lot of projects with the local banks or your SBA in your region. They're usually worried about the collateral, and we're usually more flexible or risk tolerant on our side. So we're happy to take a second position.
Great. Okay, that's all you, Annette.
Okay, I get to go. So I don't know if anybody else has already apologized, but I will apologize for all the acronyms I think we've thrown at you. I think we're at about 40. And so I'm going to throw at you MEP. And I left this picture on here on purpose because I thought about finding a wine related one, but I was like, wait a second. I always argue with the manufacturers that are aerospace or machining that wine and food and ag is also manufacturing. So to me, it's all identical. How do we best help you? And so, oh, hang on. There we go. So key topics I want to cover quickly are resources. And then, as you've already heard, thinking about the projects. So the resources is who can help, and then how can we help? Realizing that a lot of you and the growers especially have gone through a pretty dramatic frost, and there's a recovery phase that's happening this year for many of you. I personally don't yet know how to help. And so you letting us know what we can best do is also helpful in making sure we have the biggest impact with those in our region that are suffering right now and trying to recover, and then looking at the summer season at what's going to happen, both tourism-wise and product-wise. So the other key message I'll mention, may not come great to this group, is really focus on your projects. The funding sources do change. There are some that are consistent. Some have been around 10 years, but they do change rather frequently, and some of the nuances change. And as we've said by others, almost none are retroactive. So again, we're always looking forward and trying to figure out how do we best start from today forward. And then establish that critical network of contacts, of which this panel is a pretty significant one for the Finger Lakes. And what I love about it is, I'm going to go down to this slide. A lot of times when I talk about resources, I go right down this list and mention everybody who's already talking today. So I'm only going to focus on this very bottom part about the energy, because most of you probably pay NYSEG, RG&E, or National Grid Electric. And if you don't, I still want to talk with you. So MEP, the Manufacturing Extension Partnership, we're actually federal, and we focus, as do the others, how do we help small to mid-sized manufacturers from aerospace to wine? And I can definitely tell you what I much prefer to do on Thursday and Friday afternoons. So happy to come to Yates County or any of the other counties in our region on great summer days like we've been having lately. And then literally to qualify for some of our funding, all you need is a winery NAICS code, which you may or may not have because you've never even thought about it. But that's something we can easily change and update. So as we look at RG&E and NYSEG, they have quite a few different development type programs. We've heard a lot about capital and the loan programs. In the programs I work with, don't touch capital at all. What I actually do is the soft services, but some of these other electric programs can complement ESD and some others on the capital side. So specifically, we're looking at the Manufacturing Accelerator Program or the Manufacturing Productivity Program. And it's a reimbursement type program based on an application, and the applications are rolling, which means as soon as we can define a set of projects, one project or more, then we can apply, do those, and then wrap it up and you get your reimbursement check after those are completed. And I do want to highlight again that they are soft services. So think consulting and different activities where you don't have the expertise in-house, but you're relying on somebody to come in and help you. So for example, facility design, if there is an engineering firm that has to come in and lay out your building, lay out your equipment, that type of consulting could be covered by this. If there's some testing you want to do to better understand your product, or looking at components in your product, that type of testing could be covered. Product development. If there's marketing involved, you're working on a new website or a social media campaign, some of those design services can also be included. So that's a lot of what we've done for a number of companies in the area. And so again, eligible companies, you either have to pay the electric bill directly or through a lease. And if you don't, I know there's a couple bubbles where it's municipal power. For the time being, we've got some smaller grants that can fit that on a 50% reimbursement rate up to $10,000. So like a $20,000 project would cost you 10. And I realized I eliminated the slide on here where it talks reimbursements on these efforts are 40 to 60% up to $40,000. And we can start at a $5,000 project or at a $50,000 one. Flexible to come in wherever you're ready to start an application process. And then once an application is done, you can reapply. I did leave out all the slides that walk through that in gory detail, but I will leave it in what is sent out to everybody. But again, I love paperwork as much as everybody else in this room. So we do try to make it as painless as we can, but obviously there is still some paperwork. But hopefully this particular grant program is not as bad as some of the others. And we'll keep working on making it simpler. So projects, again, just want to highlight management, manufacturing and engineering, any training. There's usually multiple funding buckets we can go after for training. Finance, understanding your market, marketing, anything from new web development, branding, video, photography, IT, and then any of the quality or product related requirements that you have. And so I'm going to leave it with that. Again, think projects. What or who can help me get to my next goal? And do I have the time to do it? Or is it more cost effective for me to hire in some resource, especially if you think about that resource being 40 to 60% less than what the ticket value is, right? So if we can reimburse some of that help, can we help you get to where you want to be faster? And again, I'm the one for the Finger Lakes, which is the 9 counties, but I'm happy to introduce you to any other MEP center. I know some of you are from the Southern Tier. That's AM&T out of Binghamton, but we do cover the entire state. So happy to make introductions as needed. So thank you.
All right, so hopefully that was informative. I know it was a lot of detail, but it sounds like everybody who's on the webinar will get a recorded version as well as the slides here. Hopefully at the end of the day, the takeaway is, we have teams of people at the state, local, regional levels that want to help you and support your growth in New York State and in the region and in the county that you operate in. So please don't hesitate to reach out to any one of us individually or through the New York Wine and Grape Foundation. We are here to support you and your growth. And I think Fred will be connecting, hopefully, after this webinar to support your project and potentially many others. And with that, if there's no questions, is there anything else that, Stefan, I see you unmuted yourself, Steve or Annette, you guys want to say in closing?
Yeah, I would say, I would just echo what you just said, Leah. We're here to help, but as I think we've reiterated multiple times here, it is important to talk to us before you start doing the work. When you're in the early planning stages, when you know what you want to do, but you're still sketching it out, that's when you should be reaching out to us. You can always fill in the details later, but getting to us before you start spending the money, before you start doing the project is of utmost importance.
And to Fred's question, we're going to send a follow-up email and all of the contact information will be provided in there.
Great. Well, thanks again to the New York Wine and Grape Foundation, to everyone who attended, and to our awesome panelists. Appreciate everybody taking important time during an important season to spend with us to, again, hopefully support your growth. And we look forward to any follow-up there may be. Have a great morning.
Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.